The movie begins with a few quick cuts showing a haunted house attraction, the type one would visit at theme parks. After the show is done, Taylor remains in the area waiting to meet someone in secret. Unfortunately, the person who shows up is not Taylor's date. It's a person in costume, who immediately attacks her. This mystery slayer quickly ends her life, removing her scalp and delivering one swift slash to her throat. In the next scene, a girl named Matilda is auditioning for a role in the Realm of Terror haunted house. She immediately gets accepted because of her screaming capabilities. Bradford, Rosemary, and Danny welcome Matilda and explain the details and rules of the haunted house. When they get to the dressing room, Matilda is introduced to everyone as someone who's going to be Taylor's temporary replacement. The woman wearing a creepy clown costume, Mika, is not happy about Taylor being replaced. Moments later, Matilda gets ready in the makeup room with Rosemary. A wig for scalping is placed on her head, and fake blood is dotted on her forehead. Stepping out into the hallway, Matilda observes the other performers. She sees them getting along and having fun, which makes her feel excited for her upcoming performance. One of the performers steps outside to have a smoke break. This is when a jack-o'-lantern man appears out of nowhere, surprising the man and immediately striking him down with an axe and eventually taking out his heart from his chest. While a murder is happening outside, Bradford delivers a speech to his performers while in character. After a collective chant, all the performers head to their respective areas in the haunted house maze. Matilda's with Danny. She's tied to a wall as a victim who will be scalped. Outside, Bradford gets the crowd hyped up before the start of the show. Back inside, Danny makes small talk with Matilda. We learn that she just got out of art school and is experimenting with gigs here and there. Seconds later, people enter, and the duo gets into character. Matilda lets out a realistic scream while Danny laughs maniacally, pretending to slice her scalp off. This continues for the rest of the night until the show is over. After the show, Matilda goes back to the dressing room, where she is congratulated by Danny and Rosemary for her first successful performance. During this time, she meets Celeste, who likes to post half-nude photos for her Instagram followers. Then, there's Jace, who is a nudist. Another woman named V also compliments Matilda on her performance. However, not everyone is happy. Brandon confronts a performer named Seth for not taking his role as a headless football player seriously. He tells him not to come back for the next performance, so Seth storms off, annoyed. In another part of the room, Mika is trying to send a text to Taylor, not knowing that she has already passed away. Someone walks by and smears blood on her neck. This is something that the murderer did to his past victims, as if marking them before their eventual demise. Mika starts calling Taylor, but hears ringing from the makeup room. She finds Taylor's phone there and asks Bradford why it's there. He has no idea about the phone or Taylor's location, but promises to let Mika know if he hears from her. Later, Matilda gives V and Mika a ride. Mika is still being a B-word to Matilda, but Matilda doesn't mind. She thinks a bad attitude is one sign someone can be counted on. Back at the haunted house, Bradford sees all the clothes strewn on the floor. He receives a text from Danny asking if he's going to join them at the party. Rosemary walks in, startling him. Bradford prepares to head out, asking Rosemary if she wants to come with him. She's not really the type to go out partying, so she chooses to stay there and get laundry done. Seconds later, while hanging some clothes, a hand appears, marking Rosemary's hand with blood and slashing her wrist as well. Then, a person slowly emerges from behind the hanging clothes. It's the murderer, this time wearing a different costume. A wild goose chase begins. Rosemary wraps her wound and runs as fast as she can to the arcade room, choosing to hide behind the machines first instead of beelining for the exit. When she eventually gets to the exit, it's already locked. She ends up being chased to a nearby mini watermill. Rosemary meets her end when the murderer shoves her head in between the spinning gears on the side of the mill. And just like that, Rosemary turns into rose-minced meat. In the next scene, Matilda, V, and Mika arrive at the house party. There, Matilda spends some time getting to know everyone a little bit more. She talks to Celeste and learns about her OnlyFans side hustle. She talks to Danny and learns how he thinks Halloween has become more cutesy, rather than how it usually is. He craves intensity and edginess. Matilda then gets into a discussion with Jace about his decision to let it all out. There's not really much substance to this exchange. The same goes for her next interaction with a dude who just wants to chase people with a chainsaw. Then there's Seth, who complains about how Bradford doesn't want him to have fun. He mentions how he earns more money working for an escape room. While ranting, someone smears blood on the back of his head, which he fails to notice. Matilda then talks to Bradford, complaining about why women are always the victims in horror shows and haunted houses. She proposes the idea of having the women deliver the horror aspect for once. Bradford agrees that it's a novel idea, but points out that sticking to classic tropes is what brings more money in. People love to see what they already know. The owner of the home, Tall John, makes a brief appearance to check if everyone is having fun, but refuses to hang out with them. Based on these interactions, there are a lot of options on who the murderer might actually be. During Matilda's conversation with V, we find out that Mika has a thing for Taylor, which is she is upset with Matilda for replacing her. The rest of the conversation is just more small talk that doesn't really move the plot along. Later, Mika talks to Danny and Bradford, mentioning how Taylor's disappearance seems a bit off. She thinks something might have happened to Taylor. The men don't really take her seriously, stating how it's normal for crew members to quit mid-season. The next day, Matilda wakes up in her car, which happens to be where she lives. She receives a text informing her about the group's plan to enter an escape room for fun. And so, after her usual morning routine, she drives to the destination and meets the rest of the girls there. Before the group goes in, Seth goes inside the security room to check a few things. There, he sees a person inside one of the escape room's hidden chambers, so he immediately rushes to where that person is. Meanwhile, another employee named Walt ushers the girls inside the room and dramatically explains the rules. Seth finally arrives in the secret chamber and confronts the person there, telling them to leave. However, as expected, this person is the murderer. They immediately attack Seth using a hedge trimmer, jamming it into the back of his neck. Then, he uses the same tool to decapitate Seth. The girls who are in the other room quickly solve the puzzles, so the murderer does not have time to exit. When they finally arrive at the scene of the crime, the slayer hides behind the door. They think Seth's headless body on the floor is just another prop, even mentioning how there's a lot of fake blood. They have no idea it's Seth. Eventually, the girls manage to complete the escape room, and the murderer manages to carry Seth's body out of the building. The girls win a discount coupon for the nearby food court. The ladies waste no time and buy meals for lunch and talk about what they do for fun during their day off. Mika checks Taylor's phone and sees a message from Rosemary. This makes her assume that the girl she likes is having a fling with another woman. She doesn't know that both Taylor and Rosemary are deceased, which makes this an obvious trap. Mika abruptly leaves after seeing this message. In the next scene, Matilda drives to Celeste's place, and they engage in conversation about Matilda's struggle to progress her acting career. To sum up their conversation, Matilda is afraid of moving to Los Angeles because of her fears and anxiety, and Celeste gives her some words of motivation. She suggests they go to LA after the haunt gig is over. Later, Bradford is working at the bar next to the haunted house, checking his phone to see if Rosemary replied to his messages. Meanwhile, Danny sits down and orders some shots. Bradford tells him he is worried about Rosemary, but Danny just jokes about the fact that his two friends are porking each other. Bradford steps out for a second to look for Rosemary at the haunted house, leaving the bar in Danny's care. He quickly comes back after discovering Rosemary isn't there. Bradford expresses how he feels like the whole haunt season has been weird lately, with all the people leaving so suddenly. Danny dismisses his concerns again, saying that's how it usually is. He suggests that it might be due to the fact that the haunt season is not as scary anymore. The next sequence of scenes is just the four ladies arriving at the Halloween theme park and having a good time. Later that evening, while carving pumpkins, Mika apologizes to Matilda for being mean to her. She explains that she's just worried about Taylor, but now, believing Taylor and Rosemary have a thing going on, she's ready to move on. Seconds later, Taylor's phone receives a message from Rosemary's phone. It contains a meetup location. Curious, Mika excuses herself and heads to the mentioned location, unaware that this is all a trap. At the same time, Bradford is at the location, making sure everything is locked. When Mika enters the maze, calling out for Rosemary, no one answers. But as soon as she gets in a certain room, the masked murderer appears, quickly tying one of her hands to a metal structure of some sort. Then, the murderer takes out a chainsaw and slowly brings it down to Mika's hand, cutting it off. Bradford hears the commotion and rushes to the maze, grabbing a hammer on the way there. When he turns on the lights of the maze, the murderer turns off the chainsaw in an attempt to avoid getting detected. He also texts Bradford using Rosemary's number, temporarily distracting him. However, he continues deeper into the maze and eventually gets startled by Danny. Danny claims to be playing a prank on him and urges Bradford to go back to the bar with him. However, Bradford insists on finding out who was screaming because he's sure Danny cannot produce those sounds. Stepping inside the room, he spots the struggling Mika. Unfortunately, before he can react any further, Danny drives a knife straight through the top of Bradford's head. The true murderer is finally revealed. The next scene is another filler. Matilda helps Celeste take photos for her OnlyFans, and they engage in more small talk that's not relevant to the plot. Anyway, back at the haunted house, Danny piles up all the deceased bodies of the crew members he had slain. Covered in blood, he quickly grabs a rope from the trunk of his car, and when a man sees him, he just greets him with a happy Halloween, removing all suspicion from whatever he's doing. Later, Matilda wakes up and steps out of the house for a bit. This is when she meets and gets to talk to Little John for a while. We find out that Little John is a career professional who likes to rent out his place for fun during his vacation. Again, more irrelevant small talk. Now it's time for the good part. It's evening time, and the haunted house is finally open once more for the final show. The girls talk about Mika's weird disappearance and how she hasn't texted them regarding any updates. Danny greets everyone, informing them that Bradford and Rosemary won't be joining them, and we know why. He announces a sudden change in the final part of the show, but he doesn't mention what exactly the change is. All he does is reassign Jace as the person who will be scalping Matilda instead of him. Danny delivers a speech about undoing sacrilegious traditions and making the performance as bloody as possible. The other performers have no idea that he's being completely literal. When he steps outside to greet the crowd, he tells them straight up that he will literally end their lives. The crowd cheers, thinking that his speech is all part of the show. Before he ushers the crowd in, the two performers with Danny pull Tall John into a corner, just like they usually do. However, this time around, Danny stabs him for real, and people still think it's just a realistic trick. Danny orders everyone to be allowed to enter all at once instead of in groups. In the back alley, one performer, Zaid, drags Tall John's body and tells him to drop the act. But he soon quickly realizes that Tall John is deceased for real. Danny is walking in front of the crowd, and in the first chamber, he sees that Matilda has switched places with Jace. He cryptically tells her that if she were the one strapped to the wall, he would have spared her. He continues walking deeper into the haunted house, marking everyone with the blood on his finger. Zaid talks to V outside, telling her about what happened to Tall John. Since they don't have their phones with them to call 911, Zaid tries asking the crowd if they can let him borrow one. V then goes to the alley to confirm that Tall John is indeed no longer alive. Back inside, Danny continues leading the crowd and marking various performers. V enters through the back door and quickly tells Celeste to get the crowd out of there. While a few make their exit, the people in the front are not that lucky. Danny leads them to a room containing all the bodies of his victims. Then, he immediately starts massacring everyone in sight. It takes a few seconds for the people to realize what's happening, and Danny had already claimed several lives when the crowd started running. V almost gets stabbed in the neck, but Celeste smacks Danny in the head with a bat, momentarily incapacitating him. However, Danny is tenacious. He gets up and continues his murder spree, taking Stan's life on the table. Danny catches V again and attempts to end her for a second time, but Matilda shows up from behind and stabs him. He tells Matilda to mark him with the blood from the knife, but she doesn't want to, so he does it himself. Just when we think everyone is safe, Danny still manages to move, and he uses a chainsaw to tear through the abdomen of another performer. He pushes his hand through the hole in the body to grab V. Fortunately, Matilda saves her again. The two women hide in the changing room, staying as silent as possible while one of them calls 911. Danny manages to find and attack them. He slashes Matilda's leg, but she still manages to limp away. She finds her way into the bowling alley and screams for help. Since she is in costume, everyone thinks the chase is just a performance. Danny catches up to her and pins her to the ground. To make the people believe it's just a performance, he gestures for them to clap. Despite Matilda's scream, no one from the crowd thinks she is in any real danger. It's only when V arrives and smashes Danny's head with a bowling ball does the crowd realizes what's really happening. In the last scene, police, firefighters, and EMTs arrive to clean up the mess. Everyone is too traumatized to converse. All Matilda says is that she's going to Los Angeles right then and there. It only took an entire massacre to get her to finally chase her dream. Good for her.